Rosie Rose here, and today we're going to be talking about a short piece called Question, which was featured in Miss Lynn's Frequently Asked Questions. And the main gist of the paper's going to open with this idea that if you were to ask a bug, what color is the sky? How would the bug answer? And the bug might answer green, because there's always grass overhead of the bug. Where if you were to ask a person what color is the sky, they would say blue. And if you were to ask a person what is the blue, a person what is the sky, they might say layers of the atmosphere, where a bug might say it's mostly grass, because every now and then it may walk somewhere where it can see the sky. And the idea here is that the questions, the answers to the questions we ask and that we hear are always conditioned by who we are and what we are. That questions always apply identity, that they're conditioned as such. And this is important too, because as we'll get to, if questions apply identity, then questions might be a way to connect identities and to reach the true self of a person. And this suggests that communities that are centered, orbited, constructed around common questions might be particularly strong communities. But the paper's going to keep going and sort of ask a question. If I were to ask, what is the meaning of life? Someone who hears that might shrug and say, I don't know. But if I were to ask, what is the meaning of your life, then things could change. And also, if I were to ask, well, who do you think you are, as opposed to who do you think you are? Tone can transform the meaning of a question. What the first can be like, who do you think you are? Can mean you need to be quiet and move aside, while the second question can be a genuine inquiry, almost philosophical, into the question of identity. And also, the way a question is asked can transform the answers, or what answer is appropriate. A multiple choice question might not existentially paralyze us as much as a open-ended question that doesn't even offer any multiple choices. So what we're getting at is how complex asking a question is. That questions are not simple. That the way they are asked, the wording, the context, all of these things have a big impact. And again, if it's the case that questions can be the glue of a community or really make strong communities, then we really want to do a good job on how we ask questions and the way we pursue them. Because, questions can be used to expand human potential or to stifle it. If every single time, if I'm going to go to the store, there's basically just one good outcome. I get to the store and buy what I need, but there are millions of bad outcomes that could go. I could be in a traffic jam. I could get to the store and they not have what I want. There's always infinitely more negative outcomes than positive outcomes. And so if I were to kind of ask you, so that being the case, it's easier to ask questions from a place of worry and from a place of seeing how things are going to go wrong than asking questions that are positive. Like if I were to ask you, how do you know you're going to make it to the store? Well, you really don't. I mean, and I could always come up with a million reasons why you won't make it, where you only have one reason why you will make it. And you see, if there's something about questions that are really necessary for the human experience, and what we need to do is ask questions that increase awe, that increase wonder. But the nature of the world is where it's much more easy to be deconstructional and cynical. Then it's going to be tempting to use questions in a deconstructive manner, to ask bad questions as opposed to ask good questions. So we really have to work against that. And we just have to also understand that the nature of the world is such where it's always easier to think of things going bad than good. Because again, when you have a goal, like going to the store, or let's say playing piano at 1 o'clock, there's practically just one good course of action and infinitely more negative course of action. So you can always have questions side in the negative, be deconstructional. People say there's no such thing as a bad question, but that's not really true. I mean, if I'm asking questions from a place of worry and anxiety or trying to make you feel bad, those are all very bad questions. And we really need to be careful to ask questions out of fear, where we're asking people, how do you know you're going to get the job? How do you know that philosophy is practical? How do you know you're going to pass the test? These are all fear-based questions, but they sound like they're looking for genuine answers, and maybe they are in different contexts as they could, but we really have to be careful to make sure we're not asking questions to tear down as opposed to build up. At the same time, we shouldn't avoid questions out of fear. When it comes to questions about our deepest held beliefs, we can avoid them we can kind of answer like, how do you know, how do you know that the free markets work or something? We could say, I don't know, and kind of shrug half-heartedly. When really, though that sounds humble, what we're saying is to the person, you need to be quiet. We're not really that genuine when we say, I don't know, but it sounds that way. And we really have to, really what it's going to come down is the motives, we really have to be very careful with the motives behind questions and the motives behind answers. Questions can easily be weapons, but they're kind of funny because when you ask a question, since it sounds like you're not being a dictator, since it sounds like it's a conversation because you're asking someone a question as opposed to telling them what they're supposed to do, then they're really tempting to use in a controlling manner because it makes it seem like we're not controlling. And really, if someone is controlling, they want to be able to believe and convince themselves that they're not being controlling. Otherwise, they would probably stop doing it or they'd feel bad about doing it. So people who have controlling tendencies tend to use questions as opposed to mandate dictates, lay down the gauntlet because it contributes to self-deception. So... excuse me, we really want to ask questions that are awful, as in AWE-FULL, as opposed to awful. Questions we want to increase wonder in the world as opposed to tear down. And that means we need to avoid fake questions. We need to avoid questions that are spoken out of fear. We really just need to be aware of the power of questions. But again, if questions can increase wonder and make the world more... enchanted, to use that term, I guess, from Durkheim, as opposed to unenchanted, dechanted. And if it's the case that questions are always asked from a personal situation and context, then there's something that's very precious about questions and personal about questions. And if that's the case, even though questions can be so destructive, questions could also be a means to bring people together in very powerful and special ways, like a community that's focused on the question, how do we live the good life, or how do we help the homeless, or how do we live like Christ, or how do we create more art that is beautiful. These questions, if everyone who is gathered around them are genuine, and they wouldn't be there if they weren't in a community that one is constructing, then it's going to, their soul, their spirit, their very being is going to be part of that question, and you can create an intimacy with people through questions that actually it's hard to get without those questions. It becomes a kind of common telos, a kind of common goal. So the work makes a distinction between loving questions and fear questions, and really suggests that if you want strong relationships or strong communities, focus on loving questions. And when you focus on loving questions, the more frequently you ask questions, the more frequently you'll learn to live with love. So anyway, that is Question by O.G. Rose, and you can find more by O.G. Rose at ogrose.com, and thank you for your time.